for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumine, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome to this video with me here today. I will actually continue on the topic that I was sharing a lot about in the past few videos. So lately, as you've been noticing, there was quite a lot of sharing about a wider perspective and certain experiments and infiltrations and things that are happening as a part of our Earth experience. So I would first like to say that we need to be reminded of the fact that we are creating all of our experiences, even those that sometimes feel they're not truly coming from us, or they're being imposed upon us, or there's something else as a factor of why something is happening to us, and it's truly not the case. So when we understand that we are the designer of our experience, there's something else I want to talk about. Certain beings, certain star beings that came here to Earth specifically at this time to complete a specific timeline. And they all connect to, these beings all connect to this timeline individually, but at the same time it's all interconnected. So how is this so? The first thing I want to say is that we're not always aware of how things are created through life, but Spirit always shows me this, the experiment with life force, with life forms, as something that still not very much understood. So there's beings on each of these levels that are also learning how to work with creation, how to become their own creators, how to actually infuse their creations with light, with love. And I was recently just shown this kind of perspective, right? Things merging. So there are two main streams of the way the form can develop and hold the essence of soul. One is through the natural evolution of life. So, you know, when we have the genesis of the planets, there is life that comes into being through gradual evolution of those forms of life that are evolving. And even those forms are being seeded, and yet they're getting prepared to become more evolved forms that eventually they can hold what we call the human soul, right? There is also one other way, the second way, which is a gradual descent, or it's kind of like an infusion of light, right? So stepping down the frequency and coming gradually into form, which is what we know as the path of light being. So I'm being shown that also what we call illumined union is in a way of meeting of both two polarities. So form that developed from this, you know, sometimes we say the body of clay, right? Kind of like a biblical term. Well, it's not really, but, and it provides a certain template for furthering an evolution. Like it grows from the seed and upwards more towards the light. The other is the Tao stepping of the light, becoming more imbued into form, right? Confusing itself into form, right? Dropping into form. And with that process, you get different variations of densities. And then this aspect of life that's growing towards that, right? Which is like different aspects of densities for it to be explored through this upwards growing consciousness. They're both like, there's two spirals, right? If we can imagine like this life in creation. And then eventually they will meet. And this is also partially what's happening now at this time. The reason why I'm giving you this higher perspective is because of the topic I'm going to talk about today, because it's quite a challenging or difficult topic, and not everyone might understand it as in what's happening. So, as you know, there were many beings of light that were learning to downstep their frequency in order to become involved at specific cycles in life with their creation. So I'm going to go now, beginning with today's topic. So what happened is this week, I actually had my healing session. I applied for a session with Susan, and I've been talking a lot about her. Her channel is called Susan and Cassandra. And I was feeling into having a session with her for a while. I had it like 2 years ago, but it was more like a general, conversation. I wanted to have a healing session because of the recent, as you know, experiences that were occurring in my life. Because I felt there's something missing, like I'm not yet seeing the whole perspective, but that there's just something still there. I still felt like a lid cover on the top of everything that I already came into awareness about. So it was also interesting because I felt kind of a little bit of that oppression, like something trying to oppress, and that choice. But my body was already intelligent enough that it knew what it wants, and I always give the best and highest credits to my body. And again, right, because of this, I'll explain. So I'll get there. Be patient with me. Anyway, I was really feeling into this session. It was like an inner feeling. At the same time, the answer was like, no, you don't need that, all that. And I knew there's something there. So I applied for it because of that. I wanted to go beyond what the voice was telling me. And I didn't really feel that's my inner voice. I felt like there's an oppression of something. And this is usually a good thing because it's a sign, it's an indication that there is a furthering and there's a greater expansion there. And as you know, these forces that have their own agendas, they never want us to come into even greater closure and greater completion. So we had our session, and I told Susan all about my recent experiences. I told her even about the guidance I already received. And the moment I shared this with her, she was already seeing what was happening, right? But the first thing she told me, what she was seeing, she said, I have a very unusual energy for this planet, which I already know, right? Duh. And so she was telling me that most people, when she tunes into them, even if they're more advanced beings, they can have a wide or a big aura, she calls it. And oftentimes she would see like a person's aura expanding towards, embracing like the city they live in or even wider. But she said, your aura like extends into the universe. It's really huge. And that's why you became interesting to these beings. So we explore this, and as I was telling her what was happening and how these beings were performing these experiments, and it felt very much just like constantly being charged with the light until my body just couldn't take it anymore, and had tremendous side effects. I felt like a lab rat because in the lab rat it's like you see all these beautiful animals going into those cages, and what comes out is these distorted, beautiful life forms and missing ears and hair and all these things. And part of me felt like that, being experimented with like a bunny rabbit. Either way, it was energetic, and yet it affected my physicality. That's the point, right? Again, this. So she immediately saw and told me that what she's receiving is this timeline in Atlantis. And I already told you that the only thing I really felt connected to in terms of timelines on Earth was Atlantis. I never felt the other things in other lifetimes that people feel them. I just didn't feel any connection there. And she said it was very interesting. And everything we've had during the session was like a knowing confirmed with what I already knew. But it was like creating like a circular experience of it all. So she said that back in those days, there were beings who, they had their experiments, and they decided to experiment with form in a certain way. So they would have the masculine and the feminine would go down into the body, and she would be the recipient, and the masculine would be sending out these energies through the body. And it would be difficult, she said, for the masculine to watch their feminine counterpart to actually experience this, because it was painful. It was also related with the things, let's say, I was experiencing, how these surges of light are often very tremendously difficult for the body, and the symptoms, right, that arise due to that experimentation. So she said that these beings and how she's feeling them, they're mainly working with the electrical nature, and that's what I said. I kept being zapped, until I could be zapped no more. It reached its culmination point. And she also told me that my light family didn't really want to step in between, because it was about me figuring out this on my own, and this is exactly how it happened. She said, you were connected and you knew, and they didn't, they just let you go through this. And I already told you it was an agreement at the higher level. But besides this agreement, there was also a transgression, and this is what occurred at the end. But it's also what she said, it was interesting because it was like I was re-experiencing that experiment that they were actually doing. And at the same time, right, she said it was beneficial because now you're learning how to heal the body, like through this principle that I hold. And I actually told her what my team of light has told me, and she confirmed everything. And it's, you know, I've been sharing this with you quite a lot, that I have been guided through different principles, and they all exist within the cosmic trinity. So I was shown the source, the root of the cosmic Christ, and specifically here in this galaxy, the way it was created as a trinity, right? She calls it a triality. I call it a triangulation. And I received this as the Pleiadian mystery school of life force intelligence and knowing how to learn this tantric cultivation of life force through the breath. The second one is Sirius. Well, the Pleiadian, they gave me the name, is Electra. The Sirius is sonar, and as you know, it's dealing with the mastery of sound. And then it's that third one, which is Arcturus, which is the pulsar, the living pulsar of light technology, which is the unification, and it's actually the activation and acceleration of particles. And she even told me, she said most people, you know, they would associate with one particular energy mastery or being a starseed of coming of that origin. And she said, that's why you don't have that. I never did. I couldn't associate with just one thing. And she said, because you're able to hold and work with all of these principles, which is unique. She said, it's rare. And I've always knew that. And I always felt that the things I'm teaching is like most people don't understand yet. But what I'm being shown myself is that these things, and what I've been trained and initiated into in my earthly life, and then this experience of this cycle I had to complete with these beings, is basically setting up a pathway for this to be seeded onto the earth. So perhaps not everyone would come into a direct contact with this teaching through me, you know, in the future, what I would be sharing and, you know, teaching this trinity of life and creation of life, going back to the ability of being able to create life, because this is basically how we can create life, by understanding this principle and being trained into it. So it's like when at the star level this became connected, so if you imagine each of those star systems interconnected, and I'm getting like eventually when they each had experienced their fulfillment, that's how the triangulation happens. And what this means is, right, each and every one of them and having their counterparts, when the counterparts merge, a third aspect occurs, right? So that's at the higher star level occurring, and this is what a lot of us are experiencing now on Earth as this triangulation of birth, of spirit and form. So a lot of us are carrying these star codes that we're bringing forth into this experience on Earth, because we're trying now to achieve an aspect or level of lumen union, each within our own triangulation. So it depends the level where your mastery is, or how much you've been trained and how much you're aware of that. But I was shown that either way it's going out, it's being planted as the seed, and once it's planted, it's there, and people would come across that when they're ready, because it's basically something that becomes a possibility. And that's why I believe I received this guidance that what we came here to share at this time has not been on Earth before, because basically that's the triangulation of all these principles. And I believe that those first few devotees who are really open and they're ready, they would be the ones who would be directly learning this. Then there would be people who maybe would just come to understanding of this, they would come into awareness that this exists and would start working at it. And then there's people who, as you know, this would be a possibility for them and maybe for the future timeline. So that's very interesting. So then we've actually also talked about this, what she showed me. She said, even though this was complete and you broke through the experience, there's still these beings, like she saw them, like because of this huge expansion of my aura, she saw them like hooked onto the outer field of my aura. She said they're kind of like hovering there and still watching you. And I said, yeah, that's why I felt there's still something there. There's still something more. And that's why I actually wanted to get that session. So because of that, she said they're able to still drain you, like energetically, and they're still present. It's almost like, you know, when something's over, but, you know, the army doesn't want to leave. So she said, we're going to do the healing session, and this is what we did. And I'm going to tell you later what came after the session as my own realization when we did the healing. So a healer, what they do is they would, through your consent, right, they would go and they would have a talk with these beings, and they would have their own visions and things they're seeing during the process. So as I was lying down, she said, just focus on something that, you know, it's good to you. And my experience was very interesting. So my experience was, I was lying down, and what I wanted to focus on, of course, was freedom, was liberation, like full sovereignty of my body. Because I remember having those experiences, feeling like a lab rat and like a test bunny, and I was crying myself to sleep, and I was saying, no more, please stop, make it go away. And even though I was asking them, they didn't stop. And even she said, yeah, of course, they went against your free will, because, you know, they function in their own way, and that was a part of the agreement, so that I could, you know, like finish that cycle. I could break that link, the missing link. And the missing link means finding the origin of this, going back, doing the healing, doing the forgiveness work, and seeing what it was all for. So we've talked about this before, how certain aspects of beings actually splintered off. So even though all experiments always begin with love, it's like a mad scientist, right? Some of them splinter off and they become obsessed over it. And even, you know, in Atlantis, we've had several experiments. Not all of them were like genetic modulations, and, you know, they were crisscrossing or crossbreeding different life forms and getting mutant forms out of it as well. And they're just like trying to deal with it, like, you know, pack them up. And, you know, we still have those stories and myths of things, you know, like beings like centaurs and things like that. So a lot of it has to do with becoming too obsessed with what the experiment is. And we've talked about it in the previous video, how if there's only the streaming of light but no, like, that devotion through love and that respect through love, and respecting the body, loving the human body, loving the human form, and allowing it to evolve naturally. So remember again the thing I told you in the beginning, what we call the human souls were those beings who actually were evolving naturally through their bodies, and they developed their own natural organic intelligence through the bodies. They didn't have to be zapped through like these higher beings. Sometimes these experiments occurred, but in most cases they became their own volunteers. These beings became their own incarnations. So the experiments they were performing were being done within the group, right? So this aspect, I told you before how I received the guidance myself, where they were once light family, they were members, like we were one. But there was an element of these beings that they got too much into the experiment. They didn't understand. It's almost like they became ignorant of the fact that the body, you know, this needs to be met halfway. So it's almost like becoming obsessed with increasing the light quotient without understanding the beauty, the purpose of the body and the organic nature of the body evolves. So isn't it interesting, right, that I'm now teaching organic ascension, and this beautiful natural spiraling of the ascension principle instead of this linear zapping with light and this kind of like rigid, you know, fanatic principle, right? Isn't it interesting that I actually had to close this cycle first? And, you know, it was like a galactic karma with these beings. The ones were an aspect that digressed or splintered off. So we were doing then the healing, and she was doing her process. So she went there and she talked to them. She was like, you know, that's it, it's complete, would you just go? And she heard different sounds as well, like crystal balls, and she knew that there was resounding, like something was breaking through. So there's higher energy. And eventually the beings left, and three major beings, like totally powerful love beings full of light, like huge beings of light came. Were like three, she said, and they said, it's okay, we got her now. And that's probably when I was doing the meditation, I had a moment, like I was really feeling, I had tears in my eyes. There's this beauty that I felt. So when she told me this, I knew what's happening. And the way I was experiencing this was actually in my own unique way, because first I was just focusing on the words freedom, I'm free, I'm freedom, freedom. Just that's all I was focusing. And all of a sudden I heard a voice, I heard a guidance telling me, now visualize these beings as in on this outer fringe of your universal auric field. And it's like you're telling them it's time to leave, you know. And I had to visualize them going into, you know, it was metaphoric, but going into a spaceship, and they had to like bow their heads down, like, you know, that signal, like it's over. Sulking probably. And they had to leave, so they each went one by one into the spaceship and then eventually flew off. And I had to see that out of that two concentric circles were formed. So they told me, now imagine like there's a zapping frequency, there's like a frequency circulating around your aura, like in creating a white circle, and this will complete the experience. So I was seeing like this fast moving circle of white light, so this, my experience could become unified. I could complete that cycle, and they were free to go their own way, right? No longer like hoping, you know, to get something more out of that, and it's like it's lingering, hooked. And we always see union like everything needs to become a part of our field, but union is unifying ourselves and allowing others to create their own unification experience, whatever they're choosing. So we would see that, well, wasn't that separation because they're going their own way? Well, no, because I remember even years ago, my mother drew this mandala, like this cosmic, it was like this separation, you know, even now we're talking about this on Earth, like there would be two Earths, like two density fields, relating to the choices of those that would say, I'm choosing this density over this, you know, and others would still choose the lesser density. It's kind of like that, you know? So they were telling me for a while now, I should keep doing these circles, just like around the outer fringes, universal aura, and to make sure, right, that this is complete, this is sealed. And all of a sudden, it was very interesting, because as they were leaving, I felt my body started to shake like this. I was like, it was like literally an earthquake within my own body. It was just like for a few seconds, my body was, you know, having these jerking reactions, and just twitching. And then after a while, suddenly it just passed, and then it was good, and it was this peaceful feeling. And I started crying a bit, and I felt like I'm saying goodbye. And it was like this, thank you for the experience. Thank you. Thank you. I just felt nothing but gratitude. It was very emotional. It was that feeling like, oh, it's done, you know? It was very interesting. So if I didn't have this session with her, right, maybe it would take me a while longer, you know, to get to that point. But this is how divine our guidance is. It tells us, go here, go there. And where did this voice come from? It came from my body. So let me tell you how intelligent the body is. And not just because these beings were zapping me with light, which is like more intelligent light, supposedly, but it's because all this time my body was also resisting it. It didn't want it. It took only that amount that in a way it helped to expand me. But it was always resisting it, and that's why I had these symptoms, because the body, that's how I'm seeing it, was resisting it. There's also another thing that I was shown is when these lids, right, these energetic fields are around us, like something, it's like something sits on your energy, right? And you're a very highly conductive channel, and that's what I am, you know, and it's difficult for me. And even Susan told me how tremendously difficult it must be for me because of so much energy, and then because of all these painful reactions, I'm not able to do much. She said, I know that's so frustrating, because she's also, you know, been through a lot, and she understands. And people who've never had pain in their life, they don't understand these things and how difficult this can be. It's terrible. Plus the downside of these effects, that your physicality changes. And I, you know, was never like that, but now I started feeling all this, I'm old, my body cannot process anymore, my body just can't heal, and I feel so, you know, like not myself, like my body cannot reflect my spirit. I was feeling down and less worthy because of that. It was tremendously difficult for my body to experience this, and I realized that now I'm learning not to just love this when I'm feeling good and on top of the world, but I'm learning to also love this distorted, like not distorted, but you know, when you have a difficult experience and it reshapes you and you no longer look the same. So this experience when there's been, you know, a modulation that wasn't of your preference, and you come out looking in the way that, you know, it does reflect you, it does reflect this. And still learning, you know, there's so much love that now needs to go into that in the body. And Susan also told me that my cells are now very, they're tired, they're depleted because of all of this. So it's difficult for the cellular system to receive like nutrients or more light. Even though you work a lot with the light, they're not as receptive as they would be when they're optimal and they're revitalized and they're full of energy. So it's quite a process. And you know, I also give a lot and I do a lot of things, so that also makes it difficult in many ways. So this was very interesting for me, and the reason why I wanted to share this with all of you as well is because all of you who are starborn, who are star seeds in a way, you came with a particular mission that's not just to uplift humanity. That's one thing. But the other very important aspect that most people neglect in these star missions is that there's a tie-in with a specific timeline that is meant to be healed and brought into wholeness. So I was actually seeing during this, I got this direct guidance during the healing session, how our experiment in our light family, we've had this, and we wanted to, through my embodiment, we wanted to bring, it's almost like this element to a completion and conclusion, that this would not happen anymore. It's like it's done now. It wouldn't happen anymore. It's like now the lid is sealed, but in a different way. The experience it no longer serves a purpose to do things this way. And these embodiments, our embodiments, are actually tremendous sacrifices, because before coming here, we knew that we would also have to go through a tremendously painful and sometimes even suffering experience. So the reason why I'm sharing this is not, to make you understand my own, because no one can understand something of the other, because we have different, unique, specific missions. But in order for you to understand that this is bigger sometimes than what we think, and the more you expand, the more you're going to come into terms with what you're actually doing here. And I know so many people, especially younger ones, come to me, what's my mission? What's my purpose? It's not something you can sum up in one sentence, my beloved. You just can't. It's so complex, and at the same time, it's so simple. It's coming back to love. It's awakening the feminine principle. It's loving the body. In my own experience, I always knew that I was different, that I wasn't of earth. Even as a small child, I was mocked. And I came out like this freak, not like physically was something wrong with me, but when I was older and understood my awakening and who I am, I realized that these kids knew it. They felt, and in a way they felt threatened by my energy. Imagine like coming with this huge energy. It frightens some people, and that's how they react. So for me, it was different, because I always loved them. I always wanted to have friends and other little, humans to walk by my side, but it was very difficult for me to experience that. And partially also because of that, I always felt like a stranger, like this wanderer. It takes a lot sometimes for not an earth origin being, specifically a light being, and specifically the one with such a, like Susan said, like different energy, like most people. It's difficult, it takes time. Things do take time, and especially if you are working like just, let's say, 1 decade with just this. I've worked with this for a decade, or probably even more, but that's when I started consciously remembering. And it's like, I'm ready for a new cycle now. This has been too much, it's been so much. And now I'm in this in-between stage where the body needs to become a new creation. And basically that's my challenge now. And that's how I'm going to learn to, I already know this, like I said, as a spirit being, but I'm learning at a human level to master that, to understand the workings within the body through love, and this is when a new chapter is going to be written. So going back to my explanation, how I always loved humans, I always felt they're different. And earth humans, in a way, they are different because their form of evolution was different. Again, I'm leading back to this, right? So light beings, they create like extensions of themselves, and through them they're meant to bring more love, because I always tell you that the mission of Illumin Union is to bring the light of illumination into the worlds of creation, and to just bring enough spark for those aspects to come naturally into their own, new spiral of awakening and ascending. And it's not supposed to be an experiment, but yes, perhaps all of us at the star level, we once either witnessed or were either directly or indirectly connected with specific aspects of life that were experiments. But that's how beings grow. Even a child, sometimes they grow by making a mistake, even more than just always doing everything right? So I remember, and I still am like that, I love to look at specifically earth women. To me, they're goddesses. They're amazing. They're so beautiful. And I love women, not in that way, but like with adoration, and have deep respect. And to me, every woman, especially when the woman becomes deeply aware of herself, is a goddess, is a force of being able to hold so much energy, bring through so much love, not just by, birthing children, but being deeply creative and holding the space for the masculine also to be replenished and healed, like the Isis and Osiris example. So it's like a part of me always had this longing, and understanding how beautiful and important the human body is. But it's almost like through so many of these experiments and for so many beings, and I call them as light fanatics. For now, that's what they are, or they choose to be. Yeah, they choose to be. We're not going to label anyone, right? So it's like was lost, this respect, this adoration for the body, and for every aspect of life it's already perfect, and it's growing its own way. So I think that a lot of beings, once they entered into their creatorship abilities, they started experimenting with form. And we know many stories like this, right? And we also know the stories of negative beings like Anunnaki, and creating their own offspring here, and having their own experiments, and creating a denser version of the distorted human DNA. Basically, they scrambled the DNA code, so it would be much more difficult for humans to awaken one day. So there were so many experiments. Now imagine the beauty, the gift of Holy Spirit. This is where it gets interesting, right? And this is, for me, that's my path. It's like that even with all these distortions, even with all these manipulations, even with all these experiments, even with the scrambled DNA, the human spirit, remember, and the human DNA, which is a genome co-created by the conscious contributions of many light beings and many space beings, right? Like ET races. They each contributed an aspect of themselves to the co-creation of the human being. Imagine, all of them plus one created the human. That's what makes the human so unique, and that's why so many light beings who are functioning or operating through love, they love the human, they love humans, they love humanity. That's why we sometimes, when it's time, we come and we bring higher gifts for humanity to open up to and expand into. So that's very important. But through that learning, we can see now nothing can be forced. No evolution can ever be forced, because there's always going to be consequences to that. And so I was feeling really good even after the session. And then she also, of course, mentioned how this was reflected on Earth through Earth's heritage and ancestry, which is the lineage through my mother, which, of course, I already know and knew this before. She comes from the Christ bloodline, right, and lineage, and so do I. And I was told also this many years ago in a galactic reading. And most people don't know, but the Christ bloodline suffered the most, because there was most torture and suppression and killing and slavery, so much oppression for these beings who were nothing but bringers of light, bearers of light. So she mentioned some aspects that were creating these hoaxes and curses and spells, so that the feminine would always be left abandoned and alone and isolated without any support, and basically left alone. And therefore she couldn't be supported, she couldn't be in her full power, right? So it's important on this planet to understand that it's not just masculine and feminine, but it's both men and women, and coming together in this beautiful space of union. And it's exactly how our life was. We were always mostly alone with me and my mother, which was very difficult, and realizing that comes from that distortion, right? So after that, I also was guided, the Spirit showed me to do the ceremony, and we did it, and I created this light activation for my Patreon team members to actually work with bringing all those aspects into illumined circle. Because when you really work with the illumined light in an illumined circle, basically nothing can penetrate it, it becomes really impenetrable in a way. So what's left of that experience more for me to share with you is to keep on exploring who you are. Remember my motto, there's always more. Every experience that you think, well, that's what I know about it, always say, well, what if there's more, and feel into it, because I felt there's more, because of the way I felt in my human body. And this is the beauty when light and love meet. The body, it's almost like develops its natural ability for more immunity, for more intuitive knowing, like direct connection. it doesn't have to be zapped electrically into that in order to remember, you know. And Susan also told me, she said, you always know what to do. And my guides always tell my mother when she channels for me, like she always knows. She can absolutely trust herself. And you know, we sometimes don't, and that's normal because we all had negative or, you know, difficult experiences. But we have to understand these also serve their purpose. So in a way, if I look back, I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest, even though it brought me where I am now, and it's still difficult for me to be in this body at this time because it's not functioning the way I would like it to. And because I experienced tremendous amount of pain after the last few visitations. They did leave their toll on me, and it was pretty difficult. And I would like to acknowledge that, and I would like to share with you that it's not all about the light, you know, and that a lot of us, because of our purpose here, we've suffered because of that as well. Just to bring something into a closure, into union, to bring more love. And I think that's something that's pretty badass. And I think that's something that deserves respect and honoring. And I'm really appalled, you know, when sometimes people say, yeah, I know what you're experiencing. No, you don't, you know. Often even I don't know the whole story, as you can see. And how can someone know for you? You might have, I wouldn't even call it a similar experience. You have your experience. The reason why I'm sharing these things is to help people understand that there's greater things unfolding. There's timelines we're completing. There's things coming into closure. We're all unifying a specific something. And we have to develop this knowing within ourselves what that is for us and not get involved in any way, in any projection or distortion with others. Because you don't know. Okay? So, yeah, basically that's that. I hope you enjoyed today's sharing, and I would need a little break now. I think I was overwhelming you with videos for a while now, so at least I hope you enjoy them. Let me know, and I'll maybe see some of you on my Patreon page. I'm doing much more content now with light activations as well, because obviously there's a huge cycle completing, and I'm guided in this way. So I hope to see you there. It's called the Ascension on Patreon. And if not, as always, so much love is in power. Take care of yourselves so much. Love your body. Know that the body is so important, and it's seen as the utmost most beautiful child of creation. Truly is. So honor the humanity that we have, that we were all incarnated into. Sometimes it's difficult, yeah, but it's a part of a much larger cycle that's coming into completion now, and it's gonna, in the end, just bring us all deeper into love and the knowing of ourselves as cosmic Christ. So take care, and I'll see you. Bye.